Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our interview with MP Ryan Williams. He was elected last fall, and this is our first chance to really sit down and have an event where our members can ask you questions. It's been really busy since you got elected. There's a lot of issues going on, not only in Canada, but the world seems to be in a perpetual state of chaos. And of course, even within your own party, there was the search for a new leader. So that sort of dominated a lot of people's attention. But now you've got a new leader and things were settling down, but there's still a lot of issues that are affecting businesses. And we ran a survey, gave the Quinte West business community a chance to let us know what are the issues that are really affecting their business. I know that there's so many federal issues out there, so we're going to sort of focus on 10 of the ones that really came through on our survey and give you an opportunity to talk about them and what they mean to you, how your party or how you personally are affected by these issues. And then we'll give you a chance to talk about some of the things that you maybe aren't covered, that you think that the business community should know about. And then we're going to open it up to questions from those that are joining us virtually today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This. We've called it an update from the Hill.
Yes.
How are you enjoying your time on the Hill?
Well, I think as you opened it, it's these are unprecedented times. It's been quite the journey, and sometimes drinking from the fire hose, especially the first few months. I would not, looking back a year, think it's been a year. Maybe I think it's been 2 or 3. It's certainly been unprecedented times. We say, don't you wish we had some precedented times to go through some of the more boring years? But be that as it may, I'm happy to be here and to be your voice and your representative in Ottawa. Certainly, I really got into it as soon as I could, using the strengths I thought I brought, which was the business community.
Yep.
Being a business person myself, I sit on science and research and innovation in industry committees. I certainly have spoken about housing quite frequently in Parliament, and our military and our need for housing in our military, as well as more resources there. And I'm certainly, as a business person, first to speak up on what businesses need, and certainly have been in business for over 40 some years. So I know a thing or two about it. Still have some businesses, and have certainly felt the pain through COVID as well. So I'm happy to be here on your behalf. Happy to be here for a chamber chat. I think the chambers are really important. We went around last week and met with all the chambers, including yourself.
Yes, that's right.
And I will continually use the chambers as much as I can, and I want you to use me.
Yeah.
Keep having me for chats, bringing me concerns, and then I bring them to Ottawa and I voice them at the House of Commons.
Oh, that's excellent. When we did the survey, there was 4 issues that rose to the top of that. Those are the 4 issues that are really affecting businesses the most in the most negative way. And they're no surprise, because they're pretty well the same issues that have come out from the Canadian Chamber, from the Business Development Bank of Canada. Anybody who's sort of looking at this, these are the issues that are rising to the top. And so the business community here in Quinte West is feeling the same issues that are, being felt across the country. And those top ones, of course, number one, the inflation and the economy. Like that's so big right now, and we're going to have a question around that. Also, workforce. I think there's no surprise there. When we asked a further question on our survey about that, and 60% of the respondents said they had job vacancies that they were trying to fill. So that's a pretty big number. And then supply chain continues to be an issue, especially for our manufacturing sector. And then the last one, which given the recent rate increase, is just the interest rates and the cost of carrying the debt, which is a big issue. So those are the 4 big ones. But we've got 10 that we're going to focus on today, and give you a chance to kind of give us your thoughts on it. So the first one is, when surveyed, the top issue for local businesses is inflation and the economy. What could the federal government do differently to get inflation under control and the economy back on track? Is there a way for the parties to all work together on a solution?
Well, the simple cause and the simple solution to inflation is to stop spending money that is over and above what we need. We say inflation is simply more dollars chasing less goods. And when you have less goods, whether that be from supply chains, shortage of staff, simple fact that companies in Canada aren't able, it's not that they're unwilling, they're unable to produce more goods, the goods that they want to produce, then we're going to have massive inflation. This week, the government announced $4.5 billion in more spending to combat inflation. It's the same thing that caused it. We're just throwing more gasoline on the fire. Our simple solution right away is let's have Canadians make more things. Let's help them grow. I'm certainly meeting with the leader this week. We do a new leader, Pierre Polyev, and my message is we need to ensure that Canadian companies are at 110% capacity, that we're producing. We have the staff, we have the materials, we're able to fix the supply chains and get producing more. That's farmers, that's home builders, that's anyone who's in any sector in our food processing, to our logistics sectors here in this region. But we need to help people produce more of that stuff. And the second side is reduce government waste, stop spending above our means. There was a time for that. That was the very beginning of the pandemic. But somehow we've given the government a license, they've given themselves the license to create spending money. And what happens when we ask the government where the money is coming from, the money is printed, which devalues our currency. And certainly it does not help us. And the rationale that the government has given us to say, well, we can do it is that everyone's doing it. And then come back to say, well, everyone's experiencing inflation. It's because everyone did the same thing. We have to set the example in Canada. You know, in Canada, we're really fortunate to have the resources we do, the timber, the lumber, the natural gas, the oil, and certainly in this region, it's our food processing, it's our manufacturing sectors that we have so many great industries doing great things, but they're having so many struggles right now. We've heard about them. We have to help them do more. And on the government side, we need to work together on budgets that stop spending as much and invest more into our Canadian economy so that people can create more of the things that are going to bust and beat inflation.
Well, let's hope that we can get a handle on it before everybody's broke, right?
Yes.
60% of the businesses surveyed said they have job vacancies they are trying to fill. In recent communications that you put out, you stated that there are roughly 3,000 vacant jobs in the riding and over 1 million skilled jobs sit vacant in Canada. What can be done at the federal level to help employers find the workers they need?
Well, first is to ensure we have as many people working that are eligible to work. I think we have two levers we can pull when it comes to employment. One is bringing more skills, and the other is to ensuring that people who are able to work are out there either getting training programs that they need or are not getting assistance to stay off of work. We need to ensure that our workforce is working. 1 million, it's 1.03 million jobs that are open that we can't fill in Canada, and there were 1.5 million Canadians on some kind of assistance for employment. Now, half of that, I'd say at least 500,000 are because of great programs like maternity leave and WSIB and some other, and of course there's sickness as well. But we do have a lot of employees, let's say in this region, who are 55 plus, for instance, who are just not willing to enter the workforce anymore. Whether that be that they sold a home that was worth maybe a couple million in Toronto and came here and bought a new home and said, you know, I don't need to work, or just don't feel that they want to work 40 hours. You know, I think we really have to look at a couple of major things from the federal government side. One is how many skilled immigrants we're bringing into Canada, that be temporary foreign workers, all the way up to skilled trades and doctors and nurses. And we have to look at the training programs that either that we're pushing through, because these are provincially, but through applied research funding grants, or looking at ways that we're helping to ensure that we incentivize people to get back to work. So specifically on my end, I really look to Loyalist College, and I've met with them several times. I really feel that Loyalist College regionally needs to be the one that looks after our workforce, whether that's training programs that help get existing employees into a better paycheck, into jobs. But the second hand is Loyalist is our #1 immigration supplier. Yeah. It's our immigration portal. We have had up to 1,500 new student immigrants who come into the area, and it's because of Loyalist, which is great. So I think part of that is working with Loyalists to help find the gaps in our labor. And the one thing I've asked the chambers to do, and through our employers, is to find out what jobs are we missing and where. Yeah. The travesty, I think, right now is we don't know exactly where all the jobs are needed. And I think when I look at it as a business side, as a business person, we need to have the exact or a little close to as exact as we can, number of jobs that are missing, so that we can look to those skill sets that we need to either train into or to find through skilled immigrants. When it comes to the federal government, we're failing on the skilled immigrant side. We're bringing this year 460,000 new immigrants to Canada, of which only 45,000 are skilled. So we need 1 million workers in Canada. And if we're looking to fill those on our skilled immigration side, it's 45,000 out of 1 million. We're failing. We're terrible at that. And you know, I know a question later is going to be on logistics. Let's look at just trucking alone. We're 26,000 truckers short in Canada. They project in 5 years it's going to be 55,000. You know, we need to fill that. And when I talk to loyalists, you know, we talk about surveyors as one. We know of one industry. It's the one that I know of that we're short of 55 surveyors in the region right now. What's really great about surveyors, the average salary is about 110,000. They start at 90, they go up to 140. You know, this is a great career that pays a good wage. So I've asked loyalists, you know, maybe we can market better. And I think when it comes to education and job training, it has to start earlier. We need to start almost in grade 1, grade 2, looking at what skills are needed, how we're training our children, how we're educating them, co-ops, you know, how we're training our workforce as a whole, incentivizing them to get into different career paths. And you know, I think there's a lot of work to do, but we'll certainly start with those surveys. So if you're listening now, please fill out the job survey. I put one out as well. We want to have a good handle on it, and then we can start using business case little by little to start making sure this is not a problem no more.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, paying people to stay home. That was in the comment section on our survey. That was one that came out. A lot of employers are feeling that there are people that are being paid to stay home, and they're searching for employees. I'm not sure what that number is, but certainly the perception is there that that's still happening. So
I think the broader sense is we've lost more workforce based on the fact that we have an aging population. In the US, we have it coming here a little bit now because of our job shortages, what they call it the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
A lot of employers left jobs they didn't want to, and they moved to cities and to jobs they wanted. We have what's called the Gray Resignation coming here, which means we have an aging workforce, more employees that are over 50 and over the coming years are going to retire. The stat I had when I asked in the industry committee on that workforce, when the government said in the next 5 years, we're going to have 3.8 million new immigrants and new youth joining the workplace. When I asked the stat of how many are retiring, they said 6.2 million. We are seeing double the retirees of our workforce than we see that workforce being replaced. So that's a big concern, and it's something we did this.
And there's no quick fix on demographics, right? I mean, this is generational, so.
You can't make people have babies. But,
or make them so they can, and you need 20 years.
yeah.
Issue number 3 that came through the survey was around the interest rates, which has become more of a concern over the last couple months. So Canada now has the highest policy interest rate among the G7 countries, after the Bank of Canada announced another interest rate of 0.75% on September 7th, bringing the policy rate to 3.25%. Cost of debt has become a major concern for businesses, especially as many of them may be carrying more debt coming out of COVID-19 than they usually would. Do you support, or does your party support the raising of interest rates to control inflation, or are there other tools available to the government?
Well, certainly we support it as the only mandate for the Bank of Canada is to keep inflation at 2%. And really the only tool that they have is to raise interest rates. Of course, though, they follow the monetary or the fiscal policy of the federal government. And if they keep spending money, they have no other tool than to keep raising interest rates, which is why this week it is frustrating and, to make it bluntly, ridiculous that as we're seeing interest rates to curb inflation, we see the government spending $4.5 billion to help inflation. It is absolutely ludicrous that we are not getting that simple philosophy. So, you know, I have two sides to interest rates. Number one, when interest rates are moderate, so probably where they are now, which they're not going to stay, you know, seniors, people in fixed incomes can make money through GICs and through interest as a whole. So, you know, when we had a lot of years of suppressed interest rates, certainly was good for business, but anyone on a fixed income, it certainly hurt them. I think we need to be around the 3 or 4% interest as a normal level, but we're not certainly going to be there, and that's certainly the problem. And I absolutely feel at this point for businesses that have taken loans, and certainly I have a hotel in Ottawa, and as we have a debt load on that hotel, as interest rates have gone up, we've seen as high as 30%, 30,000 more a month in interest payments. I feel that as a business owner, everyone feels every extra little bit of cost to the bottom line, because we're all trying to climb out what were 2 devastating years in COVID. So the answer is we have to really get this fiscal policy set, and I dare say that it will only take a new government to do that. And going back to the original first comments I had, we have to help businesses make as much money as they can. So later on, you're going to hear me say we want to axe the carbon tax. We want to ensure that businesses become more profitable. So that means more government taxes and regulations out. We have to make sure in doing so, why do we want to be more profitable? Because we're more competitive. When you're more competitive, then we are able to compete in the marketplace of the world, which may not be doing the same taxes, the same interest rate increases like you said. So, it is devastating to our businesses every time there's even a little bit of a change to interest rates or a new tax added. Certainly the fact that we can't get labor, we're seeing labor inflation, which on one hand is good for workers. On the other hand, it really hurts businesses if they can't raise their prices to account for that. So, I think it's really a change in direction, ideology, and policy. We have to do those things though, and I think you're going to hear me say it over and over in Ottawa starting next week. Reduce the amount of money we're spending, stop printing money and borrowing money, ensure that we're having our businesses create and produce more things, make sure they're more competitive. Let's make sure productivity is up, so we help with our workforces and make sure we're productive and competitive as much as we can, and produce more of the things that Canadians do best, right? Our food processing here. I want to see more applied research to loyalists for genomics is one example, to look at more ways that we can do better food processing and logistics and packaging and transporting. All I can do is use my voice and make sure that our party has policy that pushes that, but certainly you'll hear me loud and clear on those issues.
And I'm going back sort of along that theme, building on it a little bit. Supply chain issues continue to plague many sectors, not only here in Quinte, but around the world. A survey by Canadian manufacturers and exporters found 9 out of 10 companies in the sector are grappling with supply chain issues, with over half saying the disruptions are having a major or severe effect on operations. Demand for goods is strong, but Canadian manufacturers cannot keep up with orders and have lost more than $10 million in sales because of supply chain disruptions. What should the federal government do to stabilize Canadian supply chain issues?
Well, number one is, I think, you'll remember when I spoke, and it seems a year ago as well, but last January, on the need for truckers, and we need to protect the trucking industry. It's paramount. We're short 26,000 truckers. And what's happened is one index that the world's looking at is called the Baltic Rate Index, and it looks to inventory levels. Well, inventories have gone up, and they normally look to those measures to say, is that a precursor to a recession? But the only reason inventories have gone up is because of supply chain. It's not because demand is low. Obviously, a part of the inflationary discussion is the need for goods, and part of that has also been we have goods sitting in warehousing. Warehousing has gone way up because we just can't get goods from A to B to C, and really it's because we've had a war on the trucking and logistic industry. So when we still fight for that, and we're fighting for it, we have to ensure that logistics is front and center taken care of. There's a couple things that we can do as Canadians. One is look to better ways for logistics in this region. I've been meeting with Picton Port quite routinely. They're looking for better ways to be able to ship our products out of this region across the waterways, and they're looking at innovative new regions. And I think that's really, really important that we look at that. Number two is, yes, truckers, making sure that we bring more immigration in if need be, but train also our local workforce into the trucking industry and logistics as a whole. We are a great warehouse region. We have a lot of different warehouses, from Trent Cold Storage. A new idea has been about dark warehousing, so where they just use robotics to store, but we can certainly do that. But it has to go part and parcel with trucking and how we're moving things back and forth. Better rail, making sure we continue to use rail where we can. But we have to put a focus on it. The last big idea is to onshore more companies in Canada. Yeah. We've been shipping since the 80s. The biggest economic crisis we had in North America is we shipped a lot of our manufacturing overseas. And now we're finding with reduced logistics through COVID and other reasons, we're now seeing more reason to bring more companies back to North America. And that's important as well. But, coupled with all that is the labor shortage. And as long as we're not solving labor, we're going to have harder times figuring this out.
And what do you feel around, the federal government regulates some key components of the Canadian supply chain, such as rail, the ports. There always seems to be a strike threat, and I know that there was a rail strike that was recently averted, that strikes with airlines and other things. So, do you feel, and I think part of it comes down to confidence, right? So, Canadian manufacturers need to feel confident that their goods aren't going to sit in the port for months and months, that they are going to get on a train, that they are going to be flown to where they need to be. Do you feel that the federal government is doing a good job of managing those federally regulated industries that are a key part of the Canadian supply chain?
Well, I think the federal government's trying, and I think the federal government fails always. I think governments do as a whole because they're the government compared to people or business managing employees, right? So I think every time we have a massive disruption like we do with the labor force right now, it's going to be really hard for a government to control that. I think, we've seen it routinely, and I think the simple answer again is we get the workforce up and running and we get more workforce staffed. The reason for the strife normally seems to be because we don't have the workforce. The same problems we see in the private sector. Let's take care of the workforce and ensure that, perhaps I can always say, have the proper people at the table, negotiation work with the workforce. It becomes a regulation of the industry. We do have, like everything else in this government, over-regulation sometimes. And look at what happened at Pearson International Airport this summer, right? Like obviously, people knew people were going to travel again, but it's still happening right now where we can't just handle a simple airport, right? And to me, that executive director still has a job, or the CEO, they should have been gone. They weren't handling any parts of that, and that disrupted everyone from tourism to the region to the country. These are big problems. Passport offices, we couldn't even handle passport. I know you're going to come in later. Federal government passports. I think Pierre said on Saturday night last week, it was perfect. We need a government you could run a passport office, right? So that's it's easy to say, I guess, on one hand, because these government agencies have also become so cumbersome. The government has added 61,000 employees since 2015, or a quarter more federal employees to the government. So, and yet we can't run a passport office. I think what's happened in the government is they've become too big. They can't even handle the littlest things. And certainly, our government would come in to ensure that we could at least run a passport office.
Speaking of which, good news on that, in that the Kingston Passport Office is going to be expanded to one of those 10-day service drop off and pick up locations. So that's great news for anybody in the Quinte region that needs a passport. You can, this is somewhere closer to having to drive into the city for that. Healthcare was ranked 5th on our survey as a concern for businesses. While this is mostly a provincial issue, we saw through COVID that the federal government and Health Canada has control over additional funding and access to certain treatments. Why do you think healthcare continues to be of concern to Quinte area businesses, and what should be changed at the federal level?
Well, the reason for the healthcare shortages is again lack of staff, and this is the biggest stat I talk about all the time. We spent $750 billion during COVID. So in 2 years, we spent as much as our whole 155-year history of this country had spent at any time, and collected in debt and et cetera. We didn't create one more healthcare bed. We didn't hire one more nurse or nurse practitioner, or we didn't hire one more doctor. So the travesty is we have not invested at all into our healthcare programs. During the last election, we talked about putting $20 billion into healthcare as a whole. Federal government does healthcare transfers. Yeah. We can't tell the provinces what to do. especially Quebec.
Yeah.
But we can certainly have targets and we can have thresholds that we want met. And part of that is waiting times. Part of that is number of doctors and nurses per capita. And certainly what's happened, and thank goodness, give credit to QHC and their staff. We didn't have to shut down, but a lot of hospital wards had to shut down this summer.
Right.
And it's a travesty in our prided universal healthcare system that we had to see hospitals shut down in Canada, especially, like I said, when we spent the most amount of money on record. So the answer is investing in healthcare. I'm a big proponent of nurse practitioners. I've talked about them openly. That is, again, provincial. But if we were to look at how the federal government can help, it's give more money to healthcare transfers that does specific things. And the other part of that was accreditation of doctors. We need over 14,000 doctors. There's 14,000 internationally trained doctors in the country. Some of them are driving taxi cabs. And our point has been, let's push to ensure, and I think it's been announced already, the provincial government, the Ontario government is going to do that through Todd, and let's get accreditation to international doctors and nurses so that we can get them the same certificate here in Canada and they can practice medicine here. I want to ensure that through the federal government, through the provincial government, and of course through municipalities, that every one of our citizens has a primary healthcare provider. That's something that we have to have, just the same as a roof over our heads.
Good. You have been very vocal on the housing crisis in our region, and for employers, I know it has made it more difficult to attract workers. The prices in the region seem to be settling down again, but the demand is still high and rental prices are extremely high due to the limited supply. Hastings County has stated there needs to be about 10,000 homes built over the next 10 years. What can be done at the federal level to make it easier to build homes and rental units in Quinte?
I had a great, I have a podcast called In the House with Ryan Williams. I just finished recording, I think it was my 6th one today, and it was on housing. It was the second one on housing. Housing is so important to me. This is the second time I'm revisiting housing because, I'm a hotelier. So we built hotels, we've managed rooms for 40 some years. I've a little bit of experience on roof over your head and what it takes to build and to maintain that. So I've been very interested in this subject. This morning, I met with Bob Cottrell and Phil Spry, who have an incredible, I think, model that we can use across Canada. So it's called Altogether Housing with, I'm trying to remember his name, but it's Phil Spry's company. And basically what it is that they've been able to, the last project in Belleville was built 32 units of affordable housing, of half of which is directly affordable and half which is still market rent. But their market rent is still, in my mind, affordable because it's $1,100 per room. And they're beautiful units, not far off from the Town Place Marriott ones that we built with kitchens, nice living rooms, beautiful looking building, well built and huge spacious bathrooms. So really nice development. Springdale developments. Thank you very much to Ingrid. So basically what happens is in these developments, there is money from CMHA, which the government provides. Some of it's in loans, some of it's in grants. And developers can now, form partnerships with not-for-profits. So the partnership is that Altogether Housing is a not-for-profit. Their mandate is to supply and provide affordable housing to those that need it. And Springdale is a whole development and he's for-profit. But his whole mandate is also to try to help it. But you can't have a builder lose money going into development. They have to still be able to turn a profit. So their partnership ensures that half of the development is for-profit, half is non-for-profit. In doing so, they've now been both involved with especially with Phil Spry, with over 100 affordable units that he's been able to develop that are average rent of $700 to $900 a month, which is really impressive. And what I've asked them today in the podcast is how do we replicate that? How do we replicate you? And how we do it across the region? I'll be hosting a meeting through the Quinte Home Builders, and it's going to be called Non-Traditional Partnerships, where we bring potential developers together with these organizations. So Phil and Bob who've done this. And what we're doing is trying to replicate that across. And what the federal government can be doing more, in my mind, is providing more loans at 0% interest. So instead of grants and just giving money, because as a developer, it's really not helpful for a development to just get a grant and that's it. It's helpful to get a loan at a reduced rate. And I think if we can find through housing, and they have put aside billions of dollars but loans that would actually allow this model to be replicated across this region, but across Canada. I certainly think that the goal I have, like you stated, is to see 1,500 affordable rental units built now. And the other side is we want affordable. It doesn't mean we don't see rental units. I think it's also beneficial to see up to another 2,000 rental units built because it's going to help alleviate the burden. And when I'm in hotels, we often look at supply demand. When we add another hotel to the market, our occupancy goes down and our rate goes down because supply always will outstrip it. It's outstripping demand. It'll always create then a better market for renters or for hoteliers. You want to know that.
Yeah.
The other program that I pitched as a city councilor was also on secondary suites and coach houses.
Yep.
So a motion that I will be bringing to the federal government, I expect to get it through our party in the next month, is a motion that would allow 0% interest loans to individuals who have an extra space in their yard or an extra basement. That given the fact now that either interest rates are rising up, or the fact that people are finding with interest rates they're having a hard time affording their mortgage, that they would get 0% interest loans to build a secondary suite or a coach house in their yard, as long as they rent that apartment for 80% of market rent. So the government sets those rates, but it'll probably still be around that $900 range. What that does is it allows us to have these residents in our area with existing buildings create existing apartments or new apartments. We allow people who are perhaps feeling a pinch in their home to find some extra income, and we provide jobs. And as much as I think this is the hardest one, perhaps the biggest problem we're going to have with this is finding skilled trades to do the work. But as long as we have people who are willing and we can create more jobs for that workplace, wouldn't that be great to see low income or affordable housing created, helping people with their homes and then create jobs in the region. So these are innovative solutions.
And especially with the basement suites, like they're already built, right? So we don't have to wait years for things to get approval and built up, like they're already existing. I know here in Quinte West, a couple of years ago, council did make that move that people could have those secondary suites in their home. So, you know, the bylaws are in place that allow that. We just got to make it affordable for people to do.
And same with Belleville. And the problem is we ask, building departments, are people taking this up? And they aren't. And the reason is there just aren't incentives, and there weren't incentives for people to do so. I think interest rates were low. People were finding they could have some extra cash. I think we're going to find hopefully some incentive in the next few years to people to say, look, this is great for me. It's great for our area, and certainly it's good for everyone who wants to find affordable housing.
So the environment and climate change did not rank high on our list of issues. But there were many additional comments about it in the comment section, most of them negative, as you can imagine. Businesses are upset that the carbon tax is increasing too quickly, that HST is actually applied on top of the carbon tax, and it is also being applied to heating fuel. Do you agree with these concerns, and what would you like to see happen to the carbon tax?
Yes, I agree, and we've made it very clear we're going to axe the tax if we're in, and we're going to push against it. The environment's important.
Yeah,
it's tremendously important. I sit on the Science and Research Committee, and we've been studying. The last study we did was on nuclear energy, which would, in a sense, our Canadian nuclear energy, small modular nuclear reactors, CANDU nuclear energy as a whole, would essentially eliminate all emissions across Canada, and it's something we're looking at pitching across the world to get rid of burning coal and ensuring that we have emissions. The other big one that we've really been pushing on was our Canadian natural gas, or LNG. And back in the 90s, when the Ontario government had the Liberals in power, one of the things that they had done was they replaced all of our coal power plants with natural gas power plants. And what it did, I don't know if you remember 20 years ago, but we used to have on the radio, they talk about air quality ratings. Ingrid, you remember that? When we talk about air quality every single day. And the reason was we were burning coal, and the US were burning coal, and factories were running. Perhaps that was part of the other thing too, burning coal in Cleveland and other areas. And it would always blow this way. The world is burning more coal than it ever has right now, besides the fact that Ontario took it up 20 years ago. And the reason is that China and India, and even Germany this month, as they find energy costs going up, coal is a cheap source of energy, which allows them to run their factories. And I think the simple fact is the world has to come together on the environment which they're trying to, but better solutions that make sense economically. And we have in spades the largest reserve of natural gas in the world. And the simple fact in Canada is we have not built one well in 8 years. And the Prime Minister made an announcement with Germany 2 weeks ago on hydrogen. And hydrogen is a great source of energy we'll have maybe in 20 years from now, even though they talk about it in 6 years. But what's interesting when we've studied in science and research is you can't transport hydrogen. What was the one blimp that blew up in World War II? Or World War I, the Hindenburg.
Yeah.
We can't safely storage it. So when we've studied it in science and research, the two things scientists say is hydrogen is going to be great in 20 years, but you're going to need something like nuclear to power it to make it, number one. And number two, it's going to be safe right now for buses and some of our other factories, but for cars and others, we have better technologies that are replacing them, like electric vehicles and hybrid, etc. So, what we do have in spades in Canada right now, which would help the environment today and help Europe with its energy crisis, is natural gas. So that's why we need to be making sure we get that out to the world. And if we could incentivize through the world, China and India, to be burning more natural gas, we have those emissions. But going back to Canadians, our emissions are still going up slightly, and we've seen that. But it's not because of what businesses are doing. It's certainly not because what consumers are doing. And if it's going to be consumers who make the choices, we want consumers to be the ones to decide what's best for them based on the alternatives they had. Taxing them is not changing their habits, especially when you go to the gas pump right now and you can only choose gas or gas, right? You can certainly go and buy an electric car, and a lot of people are doing that and buying hybrids, but that's a consumer choice. But taxing them isn't making them that decision much harder. But get back to businesses, having to have tax on your propane and natural gas, farmers especially, who have to grow our food and having no other choice to do so, is not the incentive we should be placing on our citizens to change the environment. It's decentivizing businesses to grow. It's decentivizing businesses to be able to grow more food, for instance, as they see costs go up, or to produce more things. So we need to find incentives that give choices to consumers based on good environmental practices, and people will make those choices, while at the same time allowing our businesses to grow. That should be the number one priority that we have from the government. A tax does not do anything but discourage them.
Privacy does not seem to be a big concern for local businesses, but it is something you are concerned about through your work with the Ethics Committee. What is it that concerns you so much, and why does it matter?
Yesterday, I was working with a caucus advisory committee, and I'm chairing because I'm the deputy of innovation, but my minister, Gerald Patel, had his mother passed away about a month ago, and I was the one handling the file. It was on creating a new digital charter for Canada around privacy laws when it comes to everything from YouTube to your cell phone. It's all digital. We are badly outdated. Europe came up with one in 2016 called the GDPR, and we haven't. Simple fact is, if you've ever been in your kitchen and you've heard Alexa say that again, because we are being listened to and we are being monitored every single day. And what I was talking about yesterday, 34 years ago, the Supreme Court had said that privacy is a fundamental right of Canadians. It needs to be something that we value and that the government protects. Everything from, there was a story 2 months ago on Tim Hortons and their app that everyone used to take points on their coffee was tracking our movements for up to an hour or two after you left Tim Hortons, and the company was getting that data. We had a study where TELUS gave all of their cell phone data after COVID to the government. They said they de-identified it, but the government knew exactly every TELUS customer where they went. Did they go to the grocery store? Did they go to the pharmacy? We had what's called facial recognition technology, where the RCMP were using cameras and identifying individuals. Your face is your fingerprint, and identifying where you went and where you're going. And the point we've made in ethics is that Canadians need to give consent before any information is shared, no matter if that's on your cell phone, whether if that's your face as a fingerprint. And the only area that the government then should get around that is either getting consent from Canadians or getting a warrant if it's a judicial process. And so that's what we're most concerned about. There's going to be input I'm going to ask for from the industry when we go to study this at committee of Hindu and ethics, which will be, are there some businesses that find that they need some of this? But we want to hear a good reason, right? Why they should be able to pry and listen and hear everything that we're saying and doing. So, in this digital age where we're at, businesses will tend to obviously push as much as we can to do what they can do to grow. But I'm very cognizant of our privacy being protected. And I certainly want to ensure moving forward that we have only good ways that the government is taking all of our data and only ways that are warranted and certainly protecting not only ourselves, but our businesses from unwanted intrusions.
Very good. The federal government continues to raise taxes on a variety of products. As an example, the new excise tax on vaping liquid comes into effect on October 1st. This adds additional red tape to businesses because they now have to report on this and brings the cost of a bottle up by $10 to $25 on what many see as a harm reduction product as it replaces smoking. Do you support this new excise tax?
So no new taxes at all.
Yeah.
We don't support any new taxes. Now, I just think to that note, and I said on the health committee previously, this is why it feels like 4 years ago, and I've been sitting on a different committee. But we studied really quickly. I spoke to the vaping industry, and there's concerns in the US at the same thing. But right now, as I've seen, there's been no link from vaping that's more harmful than cigarettes. And I think there's more of our youth doing it through flavors, and that is a concern.
Okay.
But in terms of taxing something that we're allowing in full force to an industry that has people trying to claw out of COVID, until we see why, government's job should be, again, to help businesses grow, to be the one that lifts businesses up. It shouldn't be throwing taxes on it. It seems right now this government loves throwing new taxes, new regulations, and we're simply saying no. One great program that Pierre Poilievre had come up with during his campaign was every time the government wants to spend $1, it needs to find $1 in savings. Instead of taxing more, we should be using that model to ensure that but on that, of course, investing into companies, investing into industries. Something I'm very passionate about is finding clusters. We know the clusters here. When I had Quinovation, or I was chair of Quinovation years ago, we looked at non-traditional, so non-manufacturing clusters, and we found craft beer and film and agri-tech and certain really cool things. We need to focus on those, right, and help them grow. If there is an industry that's good and it's growing, we need to help them, not tax them.
Oh, very good. That's my last question before we're going to open it up to those that are joining us virtually to see if they have any questions for you. We had several comments on our survey about federal services and the fact that so many federal employees continue to work from home, creating backlogs and delays. This includes lack of timely access to knowledgeable personnel within CRA, for tax firms, and other examples. Do you know the percentage of federal employees that continue to work from home? And is this in fact adding to the backlogs and delays in various agencies?
I know one specific department because we grilled them continuously, which was Service Canada.
Okay.
Service Canada on the floor of the House of Commons admitted that 70% of their employees were still working from home and said, but don't worry, that's not affecting your passport backlogs, which was nowhere near the truth.
Yeah.
We know that, in the private sector, if I had employees from a hotel working from home and I had backlogs, I would bring those employees into the front line because that's how we shift focus around. I cannot believe for a second that when we needed employees and we needed to increase the number of passports we were processing, that having employees sit at home was not affecting how we were doing our service. The same perhaps with our transport industries, with the airports, et cetera. So no, I think government still has a lot of employees working from home. They've still not clawed back a lot of the restrictions that they've just enjoyed. 100%, unless someone is ill or unable to work, they need to be working from office. I've heard other arguments that say, some employees have found they're more productive. They save on commute times. It's great. We save all this money in renting office spaces. I think there could be a case for some of that, But when it comes to the hands-on need for, say, passports or border inspection agencies or airports, there should be no reason for anyone to work from home. I'd love to also see the case for workers. I've read two different studies. One that working from home has been more productive. I've read that it isn't. That sometimes when it depends on the worker, I guess, and it depends on the industry. So certainly that might be something that we need to study. But I don't think at this point we should have the status quo that's been the last 2 years continue based on the simple fact that the status quo is not working.
Right, because of the backlogs
Yes.
and the trouble people are having. Well, thank you so much for answering those
Yeah.
questions. Jen, are there any questions? Does anybody want to go live?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them.
Okay, a few
Okay.
hot questions for you. So this is from a manufacturer. Healthcare workers are still off due to mandates based on vaccination status. What is the federal government doing to cancel the mandates federally and provincially?
Federal government is doing nothing.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's your short answer. We are pushing, to end all the mandates we have from the beginning. I've been very vocal on that. I had my 3 vaccines and said, we need to incentivize those to make the correct medical choice, but only on their own accord with their own medical professional. So we, as a government, should, unless they're, as we saw, for absolutely the first 2 strains of COVID through our medical professionals, we saw an absolute need for people, especially when we didn't have the vaccines, to be able to get that because of the strains.
Right.
Omicron has not had that same effect. And all we've stated is have that choice, talk to your doctor and make that choice. But the government should not be making that choice for you,
Right.
nor stopping people from working or restricting major sectors of employment, which we need, especially because workforce is a crisis, healthcare is a crisis, obviously housing is a crisis. All these different things are convulsing at the same time. Now is the time to ensure we're helping those industries, not hurting them.
So everybody should be working no matter what your vaccination status
Yes.
is, right? And then the second question is, government has increased staffing by 83% since March 2020. I'm not sure unless but that's what's stated in the question. Obviously, that is hurting the private sector who are also trying to attract staff. Is this being acted on, because it needs to be corrected?
So the stat I have, because I've spoken to the House about it, is that since 2015, 61,000 federal employees were added to the payroll, or 25%. And, that's 61,000 employees that, maybe there was one sector or another, but we've seen that we added more employees, but we had worse results,
Right.
right? So certainly we need to be doing everything we can, which is ensuring employees are hired to the private sector. And not just focusing, I said in the House, I said, who hasn't had a problem with labor is the federal government, right? They've hired 61,000. They're not having a shortage of workers. No, and we certainly have to put the focus on the private sector, 100%.
Okay. Very good. No more questions coming in through the virtual?
No, that was again.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just throw it over to you if there's any.
Clear has the question.
Okay. Do you want to ask it live?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
can, yeah.
So a question I do have is with all the challenges that were gone through by small business during COVID, and some struggled to survive, many didn't survive it. There were all kinds of incentive programs to receive funds to help support your business. Some businesses took advantage of those, some didn't. I find it interesting that there is a sudden surge of CRA audits on small businesses that barely survived. And the first thing we're going to do is look into small businesses for CRA audits after they struggled to make it through. And the other comment that I've heard, I have nothing to back this up other than just commentary, is that there was an increase in the number of CRA auditors added during the COVID time to be prepared to do increased audits on organizations. Any comment on that?
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. The first I'm hearing of that. So that's very suspicious. What I'd like is, and maybe Suzanne can do that, is ask a general question to the chambers. Have you seen this? And I can certainly, what I will do for you, sir, is raise that question in the House. And I'll certainly ask that also to the department.
I mean, outside of Global Med, I have two small businesses and both of them were served and are under audit right now.
Oh, and I'm sorry for that, because you're right. At this time, is that needed? And I can tell you, I can probably surmise why it's happened is the government's hired all these employees and they need them something for them to do, which is terrible. So no, I've got your back on that. Businesses don't need that right now. And certainly that's not helping. I've heard of other audits and probably the same ones that can take 30 to 60 days of productivity off of a business because, they're focused on that audit. So I'm gonna ask Suzanne to give me some more info and I'll certainly get to the bottom of that for you.
Thank
We'll
you.
throw it out to the membership as a poll question, and that will, we'll hear back from businesses from different sectors, and we can maybe see if it's sector specific or size specific. But yeah, I think businesses, when they entered into COVID and those funds became available to help them, I think at the back of the minds of so many business people as they were, choosing to accept that money because they needed it, they knew that down the road they might have to pay a price for that because they certainly didn't want to be on any kind of a hit list with the CRA because nobody wants to deal with an audit, especially two at the same time. That's not
No,
good.
and I think a lot of businesses struggle just to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part is there was a stat this week that it did show that about 15-20% of all those businesses failed.
Yeah.
So even though they got the help they needed, but I know that there are a lot of businesses now who got the loans who have to be, told to pay them back or have to pay interest, and the interest is rising and they're having a tough time. So we have to really help businesses be more profitable. That's number one.
Yeah, I mean, it was great that the date to pay back the SEBA loans was pushed back to December of 2023. Because when it first came out in 2020, 2022 seemed like a long way down the road, and things should be recovered by then. But here we are, 2.5 years later, and businesses would have really struggled to try and get those loans paid back. By the deadline. So that was one move that was well received by businesses, pushing that deadline back. We've covered a lot of topics, and we really appreciate you giving us your perspective on so many of these issues that are not simple issues. They're complicated. Many of them are interconnected. Is there any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our local businesses?
I'm focused on business as a whole. I think I said, number one, when I'll meet with Pierre Pollet this week, and it's about ensuring that we are allowing businesses to be as profitable as possible. We want businesses to make more stuff. That's our way out of inflation, a lot of it. I'm focused on our housing issue. Obviously, it's a very big issue that affects everyone. That when one person becomes homeless in this region, and we've seen it double in the last 2 years, it only takes one step for homelessness. It takes 3 to get out. We need shelter, transitional housing, and affordable market rent. And all those 3 things have to happen. And in some places, we don't even have the first step happening, right? So that's really important to me. Labor force, really important. We worked at it for years, but working hard with Loyalist, working through immigration, temporary foreign workers, working on training our workforce. One of the stats, as long as I'm an MP, I want to see improve is our median household income.
Okay.
So I think we're about 20,000 less of the provincial average. And I'd like to see more people here employed in training up to a better paycheck, which means our businesses are doing so well that they're helping employees do that.
Yeah.
Right. So it starts with businesses, and businesses are the way that we help grow paychecks. If they're doing better, we expand, and we do a lot of great things with that. Certainly the topics on healthcare, ensuring that we're putting more resources from the federal side into that. Mental health is something I didn't get to speak too much about, but it's very much important to me on how we're looking at mental health and addictions, because it is a growing problem. I do routinely, I'll do a ride along with our police force, and that's when you see really what's happening and you hear about that. So all those things are happening, and I'm certainly here to keep working hard for you. Our offices are here in Trenton on Tuesdays, and in Belleville, and Ingrid is here, and Ingrid's amazing. She's my right hand, and she's doing such a great job, and we're just fortunate to have such a great staff. So anytime you have an issue, please reach out either through Suzanne, to our staff, and I'm here to speak on your behalf in Ottawa. And anytime you want to reach out to me, please do so, and I'd be happy to speak to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. This event today has been recorded and will be shared out in the next few days. Thank you.